Tetris Attack, where you've got a bunch of squares with different designs on them, and you got squares dropping from the top. And what you have to do is you have to manipulate the square and twist them around to drop on squares so that they form a horizontal or a vertical line so that they can disappear. And the idea is to make sure that they don't get to the top. There were a lot of games like this back in the day. Pinball Dreams, a pinball game, obviously. The Incredible Crash Test Dummies. These are basically a bunch of mini games starring the Incredible Crash Test Dummies. Four-in-one fun pack. It's got backgammon, chess, reversey, or as we know, Othello, and checkers. Okay. The Empire Strikes Back. That's an adaptation of it's a platformer. And those games were super hard too. Mega Man, Dr. Wily's Revenge. Penguin Wars, where basically you're this penguin or any kind of animal, and you have an opponent across the screen. It's like kind of like one of those table hockey type shapes, but on your side of the screen you got like 5 little balls, and what you have to do is by the time limit you have to throw your balls at the enemy and hit him so many times and try to get all your balls on his side of the screen before he does to you. Final Fantasy Legend. This is the very first turn-based RPG I've ever played and beaten, and I remember I was on leave at home when I played this game, and it was pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. I didn't like all the random battles in there, but it's still a great game, great Final Fantasy game. And it was made by Sunsoft, not Square Enix. Mystical Ninja, starring Go-Man, who's apparently a very popular character in Japan. And it's a platformer action game. Nobunga's Ambition. Rather, the sprites in there are kind of hard to see. It's not an easy game to play because of its mechanics, but it's basically a spin-off of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, games that I absolute blast to play. My mom used to play that game for hours and hours and hours. Zoop, kind of like Clax, only instead of a bunch of 4 fan belts coming at you with its, what you do is you have a bunch of shapes all around you, and you have to use the arrow buttons to decide which way you're going to shoot, and you're trying to keep these squares with different designs, or these rectangles with different designs, from filling up the screen. And that's Zoop. Very frantic action puzzle game. Vegas Stakes, a bunch of mini games with gambling games like poker and slots and stuff like that. Tasmania, a platformer starting the Tasmanian Devil. Mario's Picross. It's the Picross games. This is the first Picross game that I've ever played. I never heard of Picross until I played this, but you're basically, you got a bunch of numbers, single numbers, on the rows and the columns, and you have to determine which row and which column has a dot in it and which doesn't. And in the end, they all make shapes, and you have to figure out what the shapes are. And you use the cursor to move it around and use the button to make the dots and whatnot. Mr. Do, kind of like Dig Dug, only you're playing a clown and you're collecting fruit instead of digging around in the dirt. And you're trying to stop bad guys. That was based, I think, on an arcade game too, where arcade games were kind of cloning each other. Roland's Curse, more of an adventure type, RPG type version of Castlevania. I think it's by Konami. Oh, it's not by Konami. I guess I was wrong, but no, Ghosts and Goblins. That's what it is. It's based on the character from Ghosts and Goblins. Only it's more of an action type. It's not quite as hard. It's more of an open world adventure type game. Okay. Bart Simpson, Escape from Camp Deadly. It's a platformer starring Bart Simpson, but you also play as Lisa Simpson sometimes. An excellent puzzle game, Mole Mania. You're trying to get from one area to another. What you have to do is you have to dig underground, dig holes and go underground to pop up in certain places to get to where you need to go, or to kill the bad guys or remove the bad guys. And it's got cabbages like cannonballs. You can move those cannonballs and the cabbages, and there are some places you can't dig up, and it's an excellent puzzle game. Excellent puzzle game. Speaking of puzzle games, this is more of an action puzzle game. Lemmings. You're basically trying to keep as many lemmings from killing themselves as possible. You're trying to get them into a tent, and there are different obstacles. And what you do, and they issue you a bunch of different options and equipment that you can use to stop them from hurting themselves and manipulating them into this tent. And you have to manipulate so many into the tent before you can go on to the next level. And sometimes the cursor, because you have to use the cursor to move around, can got to be a pain in the butt, but it's an excellent puzzle game. I played it first on the Sega Genesis, or I watched it being played on the Sega Genesis, back when console games had no problem doing puzzle games. Okay. Kathy Bush Volleyball. It's your typical volleyball game type, very simple. Olympic Summer Games, basically a bunch of track and field type games that you'd find at the Summer Olympics back in 1996 Atlanta. Yeah, that's what these are based. This one's based on. Kingdom Crusade. Basically, it's kind of like it's kind of hard to explain, but you got these certain icons and you have to place them on the board somewhat in a certain way, and you press the A button to go into each adventure, each icon area, and each mission there. And it's kind of hard to explain, but it's still pretty interesting. It's really cerebral. It's a very good game. Cosmo Tank. You're basically driving around in a tank and trying to go through different objections and whatnot, and trying to keep from getting killed, trying to blow up certain areas so you can get to the next area. It's from Atlas, and they usually make very good games. Solar Striker. This is the first side-scrolling shoot-'em-up that I've ever played for the Game Boy. I think it was the first one to be issued by for the Game Boy. It's a very difficult shooter game, very simple, very simple in ideas, but it's very tough to master and actually do. Pyramids of Ra. You're basically in a bunch of different rooms, and what you have to do is you got a room full of square tiles, and you have to light up each tile before you can exit the room. In fact, you have to do it in a certain pattern and figure out the pattern. You start in one place and you have to end up in the same place, and you have to light the squares in a certain pattern to end up back in the same place. You'd think it would be an action game, but it's really Pyramids of Ra matchbooks. You'd think it would be a car game or something, but it's not. It's a very good puzzle game. World Bowling. It's a basic bowling game. You basically move the cursor over to how you want the ball to curve, and you hit the A button and hope it hits the right place. Kirby Star Stacker. It's kind of like a Pokemon puzzle challenge, only starring Kirby characters instead of Pokemon characters. Cuberts, an adaptation of the classic arcade game where you're on this pyramid, and on each pyramid you have to light it up before you can go on to the next level, and you have to make sure that you're not getting touched by the enemies. Sometimes I think the deaths on this game were a little too cheap. Here's one of my favorite puzzle games. Ishido, The Way of the Stones. Basically, you have a bunch of different designs, these stones, and they have a certain shape and a certain design on each stone, and you place them next to each other so that the one next to it and underneath it has either the same shape or the same design as the stone you're placing down. It has to have one of the two characteristics, and it can be a very difficult game. You're trying to fill up all the squares to go on to the next level. It's an excellent puzzle game. It'll keep you busy for hours. Okay, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Fall of the Foot Clan. This is a platformer starring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Okay, I never quite understood what this game was about until I finally looked it up on YouTube. Hi Yankee Alien. Basically what you have to do is you're in a maze, and you got these aliens in this maze, and what you have to do is you have to set up these bubbles to trap these aliens, to get them to go into the bubbles, and once they get into the bubbles you attack the bubbles until the alien dies in the bubble, and that's basically it, and you have to do that for each and every level. Okay, Gauntlet 2. It's your typical Gauntlet game, but I don't think there ever was a Gauntlet 1 for the Game Boy. Okay, Space Invaders, a basic Space Invaders adaptation. And we're looking at 4 minutes on my memory card here. So I'm glad these games are pretty simply explanatory, a lot of them. Pac-Man, an adaptation of the Pac-Man game. Okay, Ultima, Runes of Virtue 2. And last but not least, Prophecy, a fantasy-like platform game. Not very good so far. Okay guys, that's my current Game Boy original collection. I've got a bunch of Game Boy games that are both for the original and the Game Boy Color. Those will be next in my series, but in the meantime, I got 209 of those, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and just let me know if you want to see some more. In the meantime, you guys have a great, happy Thanksgiving, and God bless you. Bye-bye.